podcast.
أفضل نتكلم إنجليزي لأن هذه المقابلة ودي أصورها وممكن my English doctor will see it probably. So I am an aerospace engineer student at KFU PM. This is my sophomore year, and I have been doing a research, or actually a report, about building an airport in the holy city of Makkah, because I like airplanes and all about the aviation in general. And one of the things that I like is airports, of course. And so I have decided to take this subject, building an airport in the Makkah, because as far as I know, there is no airport for civilian use. There is maybe an airport for military use.
An aerodrome,
I'm not mistaken.
Aerodrome. Yeah, aerodrome,
but,
not airport.
Yeah, but not for civilian use at all. Not yet.
Okay.
And so I was fascinated when I found that someone actually made a research about this subject 30 years old. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
And yeah.
طيب, let me tell you a little bit about myself before we start getting into the subject, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And maybe that will help you a little bit with knowing where I'm coming from.
Sure.
I'm a graduate of Oregon, from Portland, and I got my PhD in 1984. And I have a background, my PhD is in urban planning, but I have a background in science, and I have a master's in management. I have a broad diversity of fields. And I also have a private pilot's license. And I've flown real airplanes, small ones. I worked for a company called Beechcraft. I don't know if you're familiar with Beechcraft. They're a small company. They're similar to Cessna and Piper, a little bit bigger, a little bit better quality. And I worked for them back in 1979, way before you were born. And I also have my interest in aviation is tied to my interest in city planning because of airports. And I got my license in 1987. And I've flown small planes mostly, but I've also flown in simulators. So I've test flown a lot of airplanes, including the Boeing 747 and the Boeing 777, both the 300 and the 200. And I've flown the TriStar in simulators as well, and the Airbus A300 in simulators. And I've never crashed, alhamdulillah. Never crashed in simulators or in real life. So I'm very proud about that. Now
just
we go.
Question. Those simulators are full movement simulators, or just
professional grade simulators with the airlines. So with three, I've flown three types. The ones that Boeing has. I got an invitation from Boeing twice. So with Boeing, I flew the 777-200 and the 777-300, and the Boeing 767. And with Saudi, I've flown the Boeing 787 and the 747 and the 777. And with British Airways, I flew the simulator. I flew the Boeing 777 back in 1996 when they first came out.
Yeah.
So
1973.
Yeah, and the reason I've done all this is because I have a weekly article. I used to write in our cars daily, every week, every Thursday, for the past 25 years. And about 25% of my articles are about aviation. So I've written about different design issues in aviation, engineering items, and aviation, etc. I've also co-authored the book about the space shuttle. So Prince Sultan bin Salman's first, the only Saudi flight into space back in '85. And that book, you can actually, I'm going to send it to you online so you can take a look at it. And you can buy it in Jarir, actually. If you want, you can just buy your own copy in Jarir. And then when I'll see you, I'll autograph it for you. And that came out in 2012. And it's in Arabic. But it has an English part also. There is like about 20 pages in English on one side, and then the rest of the book, it's about 350 pages in Arabic. And I wrote the part that has to do with the aeronautical part. So a friend of mine wrote the sort of the experiential part, how the trip was designed, etc. And the prince himself, Prince Sultan, wrote a little bit about his experience on the trip. And then I don't know if you know a scientist by the name of Zaghlul al-Najjar, very famous Egyptian scientist. He wrote one chapter. And Farouk al-Baz, who is a very famous also space and a space scientist, he's a geologist by training, he wrote one chapter as well. So the book is available in Jarir. I'll send you the title and I'll send you the PDF format. You can take a look at it. So that's kind of a background. I don't have many flight hours and real hours, but I've accumulated, I would say my total hours are maybe around 300 or so, 200, maybe 250 to 300 hours. So I'm not really a high time pilot, but I enjoy going in and exploring airplanes. Like I said, I've flown beginning with the Boeing 747 at the high end, all the way down to the Cessna 150 at the low end, and including some high performance singles, twin engines, that sort of thing. Now, let's get into the research part, because that's the part that concerns you. So back in, when I joined university as a professor, by the way, I also did some work with Professor Amadeo Odoni at MIT, because I was a visiting scholar at Harvard. So in 1990 until 1993, end of 92, I was a visiting scholar at Harvard Graduate School of Design. And you may know that Harvard and MIT are very close. They're only about 3 miles away from each other. So I used to go to MIT a lot, and I attended a course with Professor Odoni, and I showed him my paper, and he's the one who encouraged me to publish it, because it was refused for publication several times here in Saudi Arabia. And another thing which may be of interest, I'm currently a Shura member. I'm a member of the Majlis Shura. I've been for the last 12 years. And I've involved myself with aviation and aerospace in the Majlis. And I'm the vice chairman of the transportation committee. And I used to be chairman of the housing and Hajj committee before that. So, and before that, before entering the Shura, I used to be chairman of the Jeddah City Council as well. Rais al-Majlis al-Baladiyan. Yeah. So, put that aside, let's go into the Makkah airport thing. So when I joined King Abdulaziz University in 1984 as an assistant professor, I had this idea of regional development through airports. And let me explain a little bit. How much time do we have, by the way?
No, we have plenty of time.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about cities and regions. If you look at the one common element in all historical cities, okay, you will find a port of some sort. Okay? About 85% of historical cities have a seaport, okay, or a river port of some sort, an aquatic port of some sort. And the ports play a huge role in development of cities. If you have ports, you have cities that grow and flourish and become very large and become very rich. And if you don't have ports, it's very difficult to have this. The 3 exceptions, cities that don't have ports, are Mecca, Medina, Jerusalem, actually 4 cities, and Vatican. But these have historical other historical areas, of course, that you know about, that I don't need to explain, that have caused them to flourish. But otherwise, if you look at any cities that have flourished, Cairo, Alexandria, London, New York, Washington, they all have ports of some sort. Yeah? And the modern interpretation of the port has become the airport. So you either have a seaport or an airport. So I was really surprised that Jeddah only has one airport, and Jeddah is the gateway to Mecca, and that Mecca has no airport. This was back in '84. So I checked out London, which has a fantastic system of airports. Now, when we talked on the phone, I mentioned that London has 4 airports. And that's not true. London has six airports.
I checked that already.
And one of the most amazing airports that London has is the Docklands, is the city airport.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing because it's a very, very small area. Yani, when you look at the airport at King Abdulaziz, Jeddah, King Abdulaziz airport has an area of about 100 square kilometers, which is about 1/6 the area of Greater Jerusalem. King Khalid Airport in Riyadh is also huge. The one in Dammam is
the largest in the world, actually.
Yeah. But you look at London airports, they're tiny in terms of the area that their footprint is tiny, but they serve a huge amount of traffic. So the one that fascinated me the most was the Docklands Airport, because it's right in the city, almost in the heart of London. The whole idea of the Docklands is that it's an international airport. It's not a regional airport. It's primarily international. So it serves the European continent, and it's designed to be a businessman's airport. So people go there, you don't have a lot of time to waste a whole day to check in and check out. You want to get 45 minutes before the flight, check in, and they're off. And the only problem was that I think when it started, it had like a 3,500 foot runway. Now it's about a 5,000 foot runway. They've expanded the runway.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just the length of the runway, it was also the acoustic footprint. So the noise pollution, airports have lots of problems with noise pollution. And that airport had faced this problem. But on the other hand, the economic impact of the airport for the City of London was huge. So they went ahead with it. And it's been a great success. And so I kind of envisioned having something similar to that for Mecca. And it doesn't have to be in the heart of Mecca. It can be away from the holy mosque and from the central area. But my idea was, you don't really need to fly to Jeddah from Dammam or from Riyadh. And then from Jeddah, you take a bus or a car to Mecca. And if you want to go to Medina, you have to come back to Jeddah and take another airplane to Medina. You've wasted the whole day. So I was thinking, what if you just fly from Riyadh or Dammam to Mecca directly?
Direct.
And then you go, you pray at the mosque, visit the mosque, come back, take another plane, go to Medina, visit the mosque, go back to Dammam, same day. Even you can do it in like half a day. And it's doable. And I thought, that's really my objective. That was really what I was aspiring for. But that wasn't really all. It wasn't just establishing this air bridge between Mecca and Medina. It was also for having a thriving community, there is a new term, I don't know if you've encountered this, it's called the aerotropolis. You've heard of metropolis, huh? Metropolis?
Not sure if I heard.
Metropolis means a greater city. Metropolis means a very large city.
Yeah.
Metropolis. So they talk about the New York metropolis area, or the Washington metropolis area, the London metropolis area. Now
like a mega city.
Yeah. Now there is a new term which is called Aerotropolis. Aerotropolis means a whole city that's centered around an airport. So whenever you have an airport, there are always forward and backward linkages, forward and backward industries that link to this airport. For example, fuel sales, ticket sales, hotels, restaurants, catering industries, all sorts of industries link, either feed into the airport or are fed by the airport. Now, the economic impacts are really classified as having 3 levels. There is a direct impact, which is the one you measure by the expenditures, by how many riyals go into the airport and come out of the airport. Then there is the indirect, which is all the industries that are not directly related to the airport. So they're downstream industries from the airport. And then there are the induced impacts. So the induced impacts are the ones that take place off of the airport site. They might take place in the city or even in the whole region, but they're due to the airport in some way or other. Or you have 3 impacts. If you measure the 3 impacts, the dollars or the riyals that accumulate from this are just huge, huge. I don't care what region you do it for. Jeddah, Riyadh, Dammam, Khamis Mishayt, Abha, Tabuk, wherever you go, the effects are huge. Secondly, look at how many airports we have in the kingdom. We have, I think, about 28 now. That's very low. The kingdom is like it's like a whole continent. 2 million square kilometers. This is a huge area. You need to have, in my estimate, at least 50 airports. 50. 50 in the next 10 years. In the next 100 years, you might need another 50. You need to have a lot of airports. The number of airports that we have now is not sufficient. And you don't need to have all the fantastic sophistication of all these airports. We have some of the best weather in the whole world. This is a very, very important point. We have some of the best flying weather in the world. You don't need to have ILS facilities, microwave landing systems. This is overkill. You might get away with just simple landing strips and FBOs, fixed base operators. Give it to the private sector. You have a lot of airports. I don't know. Have you been to America, Ali? Have you visited America?
No, unfortunately not yet.
Okay. In America, I think they have the number of airports, if I remember right, something like around 10,000.
Yeah.
But they're not airports in the proper sense of the word. And I used to fly to an airport which had one hamburger stand. Okay. There's this grass runway and the hamburger stand and the little kiosk where they announced the common traffic frequency. So somebody would get on that radio and say, okay, the weather in Milano today is, wind is from the southwest at 8 knots.
I'm familiar with the ITS, I think. They call it
you don't need to have a fantastic facility with barbed wire and with the ILS. You can just have a very, very simple facility with just a runway in some areas where you don't have a lot of people, or you don't have a lot of population density, and you can have these facilities. The beauty of it is that you will be linking all the kingdom together, not just for economic reasons, but also for defense reasons. When you think about the defense aspect, when you have a lot of these runways all over the place, if you have an emergency, la samah Allah, you need to get troops on the ground, okay? Then you just send some C-130s. They will be in Sharura and no time at all. You will have a force multiplier. You can even have fighter jets going to different areas and taking fuel and taking armaments and serving these areas. So what I'm saying is that there is a lot of merit in having more airports. Like we go back to Makkah Airport. So with Makkah Airport, one of the main challenges was, we had lots of challenges. One of which was convincing the people that this airport is a viable thought. It's something that we should think about. And everybody that I talked to in those days said no. Big N, big O. يا أخي شوف لك حاجة, دور لك على حاجة تنفع البلد. They kept telling me that. They kept telling me, this idea is great, but not for Saudi Arabia, not for Mecca. طب قلت لهم طب في عندنا airport في المدينة. And no, Mecca is different. Mecca, we don't want an airport. طب you're telling me about a value judgment. Let's look at the technical aspect. وبعدين رحت سألت, I asked some مشايخ, religious authorities, and they all said no. So I thought, okay, well, at least I'll do the technical study. And so I went out with, I found one of my excellent students. He was like you, mashallah. He was in his, the time he was actually in his third year, he was a junior. And we started going out on looking at different sites. I took my camera with me and we started looking at different sites and doing a photo reconnaissance survey of all the different sites in Mecca. And it was very difficult because we got stopped several times and we got asked by, security and stuff. But alhamdulillah, and I mentioned to you the story of the tower. Yeah. When I climbed climbed up the tower, and the wind was getting inside my tobe, and it was a very scary experience because it was for an aerospace engineer, it was a clear example of fluid dynamics when you have wind flow going into the tobe and creating a parachute effect and creating a lot of lift, and then you're just barely hanging on to life on that on the steps. So to make a long story short, as you saw in the research paper, we found at least two sites, which were good enough to have the airport. Now we looked at runway lengths. I was thinking about 5,000 feet. We went and talked to Saudi, and I wrote a letter to Boeing, and Boeing are an incredible company. They're really they treat you right. They sent me a whole bunch of. I asked for the airport characteristics. I'm going to send it to you, by the way, in a PDF file. But in those days, we didn't have PDF files. It was just paper files. I think I might have one here somewhere. I'll look for it.
Landing requirements?
Yeah, it's actually airport characteristics. Aircraft characteristics for all their products. So for Boeing 737, 757, 767, 777, 747. They've stopped most of these. They stopped the 76 and the 75 and the 74. But in those days, they sent me a box, a huge box with all of their aircraft. They sent it to me to the university. And I looked at it and I found out that you could operate a 737, which was the workhorse of Saudi at the time, from a 6,500-foot runway. So as you know, as your range increases, your runway requirement increases because you need to carry more fuel. As your altitude increases, your runway length increases because your density altitude becomes a critical factor. So Mecca, of course, is a 2,000-foot runway, 2,000-foot altitude. So it's going to require a longer runway than Jeddah, for example, for the same sort of performance requirements. So anyway, we came up with a 6,500-foot runway figure. And we found the two sites that we looked at, they had areas which would allow at least for that. So maybe more. You could go into a little bit more than 6,500 feet run. And we also looked at two things: supply side, demand side. So on the supply side, do you have enough to have enough area to put the runway and the facilities for the airport? At the demand side, do you have enough demand to justify having the airport? We went to the demand side, we went to Saudi. We looked at all their traffic forecasts. Now they have a department in the marketing, under marketing, which looks at traffic forecasts for all the different routes. And we saw that it was a piece of cake. a lot of people who come to Jeddah are actually going to Mecca. So by having an airport in Mecca, it's a done deal. ما يبغى لها يعني.
So there is the demand.
Huh?
There is the demand.
Yeah. So we looked. So we found that the demand was there, supply was there. We went ahead, and I published the paper. I didn't publish it actually. I sent it for publication just before I left to America, because I was, as I mentioned, I was a visiting scholar at Harvard back in July of 1990. And about 6 months later, they said paper was not good enough to publish. And so I was, of course, very disappointed. But I asked them what was wrong with the paper. And I didn't see that there was really any technical reason why it shouldn't be published. The reason the referees didn't like it was because of a value judgment. Because they believed, like most people in those days, that you shouldn't really have an airport in Mecca. You shouldn't have airplanes flying in Mecca skies. And so what I thought, I showed it to my professor at MIT, Professor Odoni. He read the paper and he gave me his approval. He said, "This is a good enough paper to publish, and if you want, you can publish it in the States. You don't have to publish it in Saudi Arabia." But I wanted to publish it in Saudi Arabia because that's where it needs to be published. It's about Saudi Arabia. It's about the holiest city in Saudi Arabia and the whole world. It should be published in Saudi Arabia. That's the right place for that paper. So to make a long story short, so when I came back from Harvard, which was in '93, I reworked the paper. I resubmitted it. It got turned down again. I think I submitted it 3 or 4 times, and the last time it was approved. So the one you have, I think it's 2002, but that was the publication online. I think the original one, when I received the approval, it was in the late '90s somehow. So in a nutshell, that's the story of the paper. Now, just a quick footnote. There are no airports in Jerusalem. There are no airports in Vatican. But that has to do with other factors. Jerusalem has hilly terrain. There's hilly terrain surrounding it. And also, Jerusalem has, it's a very, very tight area. It doesn't have the huge amount of space that Mecca has. But having said that, in the old days, there used to be an airport in Jerusalem, in the north of Jerusalem. I think Matar, I'll get you the name. It's been closed for like years. But because I know this because I did some work in Jerusalem. Yeah, part of my work I was a research scholar with the Harvard team that worked in Jerusalem. So I saw this airport. They had this airport north of Jerusalem. So I'll research it. I'll give you the name right now. So that was kind of interesting point. So we don't have an airport in Vatican because of the population density. There is just no way you can. I don't know if you've been to Rome, but Vatican is in an area which is so built up, and it's such a small place. You can't really have an airport in that.
It's the Mecca for
but in
Christians.
Sorry.
It's the Mecca for Christians, right? Yeah, like something similar to that.
I'm sorry, Mauritania, I can't hear you.
It's the Mecca of Christians.
What is Jerusalem?
Like something similar.
Jerusalem?
No, not Jerusalem. Jerusalem for Jewish people. Vatican City.
Actually, Jerusalem for the 3 religions. Jerusalem is the holy city for for Muslims and Christians and Jews. Vatican is for Christians, for Catholics. في عطاروت is is the old airport, one of the old مطار القدس الدولي اسمه عطارود. وكان اسمه برضه قلنديا airport. And it was actually opened by the British because the British used to be occupiers of Palestine in the old days. So it was opened in 1924, and I think it closed in like 1950 ولا حاجة. مطار قلنديا.
Okay.
Yeah. But these airports were very small. يعني حتى مطار even Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv is not a big airport. So that's kind of in a nutshell. I don't know if I've missed anything. If you have any questions, go ahead.
You have summed it up. Well, not a question, but an add-up to what you said. I have looked for several airlines that have airplanes that can land in like small runway, and actually now in Saudi Arabia we have an airline that can do landings in this airport. For example, Nasma Airline. Of course, you heard about it, right?
Yeah.
It has the ATR 72. It can perform this short runway, right?
Yeah.
And also, Ethiopian Airline has the same airplane, so it can land.
Yes.
So it will serve like nearby countries, not just in Saudi Arabia, in the current needs. I mean, the searches were about like 30 years, but for now, it has some potential for some airlines in the Middle East and some areas.
Actually, let me add something, if I may. If you look at the type of aircraft that operate out of the Docklands Airport in London.
Yeah, I did, and
some of them, the Airbus A318 operates out of there. And they actually have, I think I mentioned this to you already, they have a flight. They used to have a daily flight from London to JFK, to New York. So it took off from London, it landed in Shannon, and people landed in Shannon, they got their passports stamped to enter America, and they filled up with fuel in Shannon, and then it would fly nonstop from Shannon to JFK. And the flight is full business class, only about 35 seats. So you could have a 318, Airbus 318, or maybe 319 even, I'm not sure, that could land in 6,500 foot runway very comfortably. And also you could have some of the regional jets like the Embraer, and an interesting airplane also is the Bombardier.
Yeah.
That Bombardier, this year they came up with Bombardier the Airbus 220, which used to be the Bombardier C series. The C series is a smaller airplane than the Airbus 320, smaller than the Boeing 737, and it's designed for smaller airports, and very, very intelligent airplane, from 100 to 130 passengers. So that's another.
And also Egyptian Air has acquired, I think, 6 of them. So
yes. Well,
there will be.
Now it's called the Airbus 220, A220. Because Airbus bought the C series line from Bombardier.
Yeah, that's right. So thank you very much for meeting me.
You're welcome.
And I will end the recording, but I want to ask you some questions out of the record, okay?